Yeah, we'll talk about Leigh Griffiths in a bit more detail later on, but we do want to talk about the new signing, OSAZE URHOGHIDE. That is the pronunciation we're going with for now because I've been looking at videos of him and interviews with him, and it is hard to nail down how he actually pronounces his name. So we'll go with OSAZE URHOGHIDE for now. He is signing from Sheffield Wednesday. Be sure to leave a comment below, by the way, if you're watching on the stream, and subscribe to the channel as well. Let us know what you think of the signing so far. Let us know what you think of Leigh Griffiths signing on for another year. So the basic stats on URHOGHIDE signing from Sheffield Wednesday is that he's 20 years old. He has 21 appearances last season, 17 the year before. He plays centre back. He seems to be quite athletic, seems to be quite quick, and he does a very good post-match press conference. He seems like a very nice boy. That's all that I'm going to say about OSAZE URHOGHIDE for now. James, have you been looking into him a little bit more?
Yeah, so I took a look at him a little closer this morning on some video as well. I'd looked at his kind of stat portfolio yesterday. He doesn't have a lot to go on. So let's start with that it's limited. He basically was a starter for half a season at Wednesday. Last season, I think he only got in four matches. So in total, between the two seasons, it's about 1,600 minutes. So that's not a lot to go on. I think he turns 21 this summer, not too long. It might be, I forget it, maybe August, it might be this month, I forget, but it's coming up relatively soon. So this coming up will be his age 21 season. When I looked at his stat profile, something didn't make sense to me, which was clarified when I looked at his video. I think he's probably going to be a right back. I don't think he's going to be a center back at Celtic. He's quite athletic, as you said. He's got good pace. From what I'd read and heard, he did come up as a right back to a degree. I think at Wimbledon was where he was at before Wednesday. And maybe when he was younger, he also played right back. So I just don't see how he profiles as a center back unless he was played with another ball playing center back. And in that instance, he's not big enough and he's not good enough in the air usually to pair. So I'm having a difficult time. If Postel Lukaku is going to play a fourth back, which has been his tendency in his track record, then I have a hard time reconciling how he would fit in that kind of a system. Maybe with Julian, but one of the big deficiencies in his stat profile is passing. He's not a very good ball progressor or kind of creative passer from deep. And so I think he's going to be a right back. That's my guess. Okay. The issue with that is there's no data on that. Even from he played mostly as a right center back in a 3. Also at left center back at Wednesday over those 1,600 minutes. So he did get a lot forward quite a bit. He's, pretty good at progressing the ball with runs, what they call progressive runs, which, really highlights his athleticism and pace. But he didn't really cross the ball much. I mean, he literally, at least in Y Scout data, he had 4 crosses over those 1,600 minutes. Okay. Now he looked, it's 4 freaking crosses. I mean, what are you gonna get from 4 crosses? Most of them were pretty good. I mean, they look from a technique perspective. I mean, he looked like a guy who knows how to cross the ball. So, so that I suspect, and that's been one of my issues that I've talked about, is the kind of the physical profile of Celtic squad and how that's manifested in set pieces and kind of across the board, is that they are not, they haven't had the physical profile of much of our European peer group. Meaning that when you have a guy of Greg Taylor's size playing at left back, unless he's got lightning pace and just incredible on the ball, like a Frimpong, for example, where that size profile you can kind of tolerate because he's an outlier in quickness and pace and running. Somebody like a Taylor, who's really on the short side, isn't all that physical. If you have too many of them, which we have, particularly last season in the first team, then you're quite small. And I think this is kind of a European level physical profile for a right back, I think.
Okay. One thing, look, it's tough to judge a player on the highlights that are available online, because inevitably they're always going to be really good, right? Nobody's going to put up a highlight reel of OSAZE Urhoghide's his defensive mishaps or his mistakes. 20 years old, he's going to be making those mistakes anyway. But one thing that I noticed was his ball carrying out from defense seems to be quite strong, or seemed to be one of the highlights from the videos that are available of him. Is there ball progression in terms of him carrying the ball out of defense? Is there data to back that up, or how does he look in that sense?
Yeah, so that's where you get into, it's difficult to extrapolate that, because it depends on the style of play that he's in the squad he's playing in. So Wednesday were, for the most part, a pretty bad team on the way to get relegated. They were typically not on the ball much. They, I think it did impact some of his passing stats. A lot of hoofball, a lot of him not even looking up before he was just kicking the ball and clearing it. So given the profile of the team he was playing, I think that needs to be taken into account. So his raw data is not great relative to, let's say, progressive runs. His dribbling data is a little better, so kind of taking other players on and beating them. And I think that's where you see the athleticism really shine through. And on the occasions when he did have space to operate and do progressive runs, which again, that translates to Celtic. I'll give you an example. So he basically averaged around I think it was 1.7 dribbles per 90 minutes. In this kind of, let's say, right center back and a back three. At Wednesday, Greg Taylor averages 3.5. And we know he's not the most quick, fast, ball progressing fullback around. And, he was averaging 3 to 3.5 dribbles as a left back at Celtic. So I think he'll scale. I think that because of his athleticism, you can see it. And I think that's even Postolokogu's comments about him as far as seeing some of those attributes. I think that's the kind of thing he might be talking about, which is you can see it there. It's not manifesting in his data yet or stats, I think, because of the role he was playing and the team in which he was playing. So I'm pretty optimistic on that front. There's some other red flags that are, that are there as well. I mean, I think he's young, so I think his positional sense may not be great yet, and that's not unusual for a younger player. He got caught out quite a bit in some of the things, making some of those runs and then maybe not making the best decision, losing possession, and then not being in great position. One of the other big benefits where I do think he does fit with an Ange type of system is that he is very aggressive when he does lose possession. So there's no hesitation. It is a militant, immediate, hard charging attempt to get the ball back. So I think, again, from Ange's comments, that's an attribute I think that would certainly lend itself. But the passing and the loss of possession, he gets caught on the ball a fair amount. His data on losing possession is quite high relative to how often he's on the ball. Again, I think some of that's because of the style of play, and the caveat that we're dealing with limited minutes. So I'm fascinated as far as whether or not he is going to be used as right back. I wouldn't be shocked if he's the starting right back heading into Midtjylland. That's my flyer guess at this point. We'll see. I mean, at this point, it's either him or Ralston. So, that's even theoretically, or maybe Leo Connor, I guess. So,
the pressing immediately will either be a massive success or a massive hindrance on the team, depending on whether the team all do it as one. Because there is nothing worse in a team than a man running mad after the ball. If the other players aren't doing it as well, it just opens up space for the opposition to pass it behind. So that will be interesting as well. One other player that Celtic have been linked with having gotten it over the line yet, but it seems like it is going to happen. That's Mario Vuskovic, the Croatian centre back. What have you made of that link?
So he definitely profiles as a ball playing center back. So he performed in his age 19 season. It basically a team that's, let's say, as far as rating, we talk about this before, things like ELO, and there's a soccer power index that 538 put out. So again, these are all tools. They're not, handed down by the hand of God as far as being 100% true. But so his team in Croatia was basically better than Hibs, let's say. So they'd kind of slot in as the third best team in Scotland. And the league overall ranks pretty close to the Scottish league, but it's a little bit better dispersed. I mean, you've got Zagreb, which is the best team by far. And then kind of the middle class is a little more robust. So they don't have that second elite team in the league like Scotland does. So there's a little bit more robust middle class. So I think the competition level on balance is pretty good and comparable to what he would face in Scotland. So at age 19, he performed really well. His metrics were quite good, particularly on the ball. His ability to pick out a pass and progress the ball and to find players in space to take out lines is Alan, who's on vacation, by the way. That's Alan's not. He's on vacation. Quite encouraging for someone his age to be able to pass, not only in identifying them, but then executing. I mean, his accuracy was quite good in the season. So, he's decent size. His defensive metrics are good enough. So, and I think at that age, he's going to mature more. He's going to probably get bigger and stronger. So I think, kind of good enough profile on the defending side, to me, strikes me as somebody who would be a good match to play alongside Julian. Pretty good pace, recovery speed, and ball playing. So I think he profiles, and it, as far as his age group, he's right up there. I mean, he's ranked as far as, kind of imputed or implied market value. He's kind of top 10, top 12 in Europe for his position and his age group. So that would be a good investment when I say good, meaning that it's a significant amount for Celtic, and a talent level that I think we should be targeting. Doesn't mean it's going to work out.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean he's going to settle. There's all the normal risks that come about, but at least it looks like a coherent quality level that we should be associated with and looking at. Now we'll see if it gets closed. I mean, who knows if it's just a rumor, if it's serious. But to me, that one would be exciting. And that also fits with what we've seen. This is also why we'll get on the Griffiths, how he doesn't fit. But both of these guys fit the profile that we would expect under Ange Postecoglou and what he's talked about. Which is, if you're going to play a helter-skelter, hell-bent, like the video that the club put out today, the mic'd up that everyone's enjoying today, that I watched shortly before coming on here, kind of this nonstop pressure, you lose the ball, get it back immediately. That's high energy. That's going to lend itself to youth.
Yeah.
And people in their physical prime, and that's basically 20 to 24. So these two fit that profile, and because this would be Vuskovic's age 20 season, and this will be Urhoghide's 21. So that's right in there. They could develop, and getting back to this idea of a model of having player development, a coach focused on player development, recruitment in alignment with that. So I see coherence there, and a role that they would fit within the team.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. What's exciting for me is the fact that, Ange is there now. So we know who is searching for these players. We know what type of player, or at least have a rough idea what he's looking for. And it's no longer rumor for rumor's sake. These players are actually, they could slot in, and you're imagining what the starting 11 could be. Christopher Ajer potentially might still be at the club, depending on if the club can find a suitor for him. He doesn't want to be there. He's made that clear, and I think that's fair enough that he doesn't want to be there next year. He was made promises by the club, and we should hold up our end of that. But if he's there, and if Julian's fit, and if Vuskovic comes in, and Urhoghide's there, then that's a much better center. That's a much better defense than last season's defense of Greg Taylor, John Joe Kenny, Laxalt, Duffy. You know, it makes sense. They're permanent players. They're going to be at the club, and I think shape wise, it would make much more sense going forward. Then Kevin Nisbet is being linked with the club. He was obviously a target for Celtic, or has been a target for a while now. Second top goal scorer in the Scottish League last year. Does he fit the model? Because for me, I'm not sure if he's dynamic enough, not sure if he's quick enough for the high pressure, high intensity role up front. But I mean, I haven't looked at the data, so what do you think?
I think he profiles pretty well. He's efficient in his attacking, meaning that he typically makes pretty good decisions. You know, his let's say XG per shot is actually quite high. He doesn't shoot a ton. That's so his average number of shots per game aren't that high relative to other strikers and relative to being on a Hibs team that was right around, depending on how you measure, probably third or fourth in attacking quality in the league. So I think his athleticism is definitely there. I think from a counter pressing and a pressing perspective, I think he fits. So I actually think he profiles pretty well. He's decent in the air. The areas that are a little bit off in his profile is he hasn't created a lot for other teammates. So he for a striker that doesn't shoot a ton, kind of like to see a little bit more creativity. But that's a volume issue. So again, I don't know how much of that was a system problem at Hibs, and I've had mixed thoughts on Ross's tenure at Hibs as far as trying to get a clue as far as what it is they're trying to actually do.
So what you're telling me is Nisbet needed Neil Lennon to tell him to shoot on site?
No, not necessarily that. It's just his amount of touches in the box, and there's just something missing there. I mean, if he's a striker that's going to be dropping deep and linking play, which actually he's pretty good at receiving long passes and hold up play. He's pretty good. So the missing link is normally, and actually we talk about this as a transition into Leigh Griffiths. Then Griffiths under Dyla was a volume shooter, but he didn't really create for his teammates. His shot assists or key passes, that type of metric where he's generating a shot for a teammate, was quite low actually under Dyla. I mean, he was like my usual cross sport metaphor. He's like a ball hog in basketball, right? He just shoots all the time. He doesn't pass any of his teammates. And then that one of the influences that Rodgers clearly had on Griffiths was getting him to focus on that playmaking, dropping a little deeper. And to Griffiths' credit, he is quite good at that. I mean, his ability to create chances for teammates and his vision and his picking out a pass around the penalty area is quite good when he's done it and focused on it. What I think I see in Nisbet's data, and just having observed him, is he played more of that dropping deep striker role. His quality when he does actually make that pass is pretty good. The volume just isn't there. So the volume of shots wasn't there. The volume of chance creation wasn't there. So I'm just not sure what was not working relative to the Hibs system. So I don't know is the long answer. But I see enough raw potential there as far as for a player to be picking out passes of quality. I worry about quality more than quantity, and because that's a kind of a proxy for decision making. And if you get them in the right system on the right team with talent around them, then that can kind of blossom. I think that's my premise anyway. So I would be relatively optimistic on him. Now, again, price and whether he's good enough to be the first striker, kind of lead the team in the line, I don't know. I think that's probably a little too early. But he still is only 24. And so we see late bloomers that, like one of the things that I was wrong on last season was being somewhat skeptical on Ivan Toney, given his progression, his career progression. He was in League One. Why is he 24 in League One? There were those kind of just standard development questions. And one of the caveats I wrote about at the time was, well, he might be a late bloomer. And it turns out he probably is. So Nisbet seems to be on that path based off of his career arc and where he's kind of come up through. So he could be right at that part of his career where he's really accelerating. And so I find that an appealing idea. And again, another one that to me seems coherent relative to how we think the team's going to play.
What about Leigh Griffiths then? I'd say before I get your opinion on Leigh Griffiths, I want to give my opinion on Leigh Griffiths, because why? Like, why are they doing this? It makes no sense from a business perspective, because you're not going to sell him on at the end of the year, regardless of how many goals he scores, because of his age. Nobody wants him. He's not going to get you 20 goals a year, no matter what anybody says. He's not. I'm not having the hypotheticals of, if Ange gets him fit, then he's a good striker. He's had 4 years to get fit. He hasn't done it. He's unprofessional as a player. Yes, he's a really good player. He's a good striker. He gets goals. He once was a really good goal scorer, but he's not anymore. So I'm sick of this, emotional attachment to a player and keeping him for the sake of keeping him. And we've done this before. It never works out. So why are we doing it again?
I don't know. I try to always think probabilistically when we're having kind of an analytical conversation, and that's obviously kind of the point of why we do this. So I think I agree with you in the sense that the probabilities of him having a 2016-17 Scott Brown season, meaning that, at the end of the Dyla reign, Brown hadn't covered himself in glory as far as some of the issues that went on within the squad with Dyla. He hadn't been fit quite a bit, and his performance levels hadn't been all that great under Dyla in those 2 seasons. And then all of a sudden, it was like a rebirth, and he kind of turned the corner from a lifestyle perspective, and Brendan Rodgers really kind of inspired him or worked with him in order to facilitate that. And so I don't completely rule out that as a possibility, but I remain skeptical, because Griffiths has really had pretty well-reported professionalism issues with multiple managers now, including one who's, by all kind of reports, an elite man manager in Brendan Rodgers, meaning that from an emotional intelligence perspective, he studies psychology and cognition. I mean, he works at it. It's not just something that, it's a skill that he's developed and actually focused on how to make his players feel good and be part of the team. And he couldn't even keep Griffiths going. So, I mean, the number of minutes that Griffiths has played has been, pretty pathetic the last few seasons. And in some of his performance data, you can see physical decline already setting in, and he'll be 31 next month, I think it is. So unless he's going to have that kind of rebirth, and my guess is that the probabilities of that are quite low because of the track record. I don't know, because even if in a perfect scenario where he does have a rebirth, I don't think he profiles for a Postecoglou style of play. I mean, he was never, even at his peak, he was 25, in his 40 goal season under Dyla. And even before that, he was never a high intensity, high pressing, kind of go type of striker. So it doesn't make sense to me. So that leads me to question, okay, well, if it doesn't make sense, then what's going on? I don't know. You know, could there be something where somehow Celtic signing him up for a 1-year contract enables a transaction for another transfer? Meaning that I don't know enough about how the accounting of clubs like an Aberdeen or a Hibs, you know, theoretically clubs that you might think in the SPFL could find a Griffiths player profile attractive, where maybe the wage bill, there's some accounting mechanisms, you know what I mean? Like some financial engineering where if it comes off of Celtic's books and goes over, like there might be some kind of transactional process here, but I'm struggling. I mean, obviously I sound like I'm talking nonsense there because I'm really struggling to come up with a scenario or a rationale as to how this makes sense, not only from a probabilities of him being enlightened and rebirthed, but even if he were, does he fit? And that I still struggle with making that case or understanding how that could happen. I mean, he was down, you know, some of his mobility metrics, you know, like progressive runs or dribbling and his success rate in winning dribbles. I mean, they're down 60, 70, 80% from where he was at, you know, in his kind of peak years under Dyla, or even that first year under Rodgers when he was still pretty productive and effective. I mean, the last time he scored a goal in even a theoretically meaningful game where it meant something and it was against a decent level opponent was almost 3 years ago against Rosenborg in Europe. Prior to that, I think it was Anderlecht on the great Tierney cross, and I think in the 3-0 under Rodgers. So, and I think that's going on. That's 3+ years. So, I don't get it.
Yeah. I don't like to be a what have you done for me lately kind of guy, but Leigh Griffiths genuinely has not done anything for me in the last 5 years. So 5 years is a hell of a long time in football. For if you're looking, like if you're relying on a player to get back to his peak, 5 years is a lifetime when it comes to football. And if you haven't done it in that period, you're not going to do it again.
Well, it's unquestionable that he's a good striker of the ball. He's got finishers instincts. You know, if he's in a good position and a ball happens to fall to him, he's really good at being a clinical finisher in that kind of situation. Kind of that, you know, Pavlovian response. He's still really, really good. And you see that against lower quality competition. So, and that's, I think, where some of the renewed optimism about him was because of the period after the winter break in the 1920 season when Celtic went 3-5-2 under Lennon and he got to play with Edouard. And that was a really good stretch of underlying performance for the team. But there was a lot of reasons for that. McGregor got freed up from playing next to Brown, which we've talked about forever on this show. You had Ncham playing as an 8, so he came in for Christie at that time, and we've talked about how good he had been at times as far as passing and creating in that kind of role. And then you had Edouard just really performing at an elite level over that stretch, and it was against poor competition. That's the other thing. Celtic did not play any games during that stretch against a team of any quality. And that's, if you look at, you know, the fulsomeness of even when he was firing in those kind of 3 seasons, Griffiths really feasts on lower quality teams. I mean, the goal tally against the lower half of the league, he really picks up a lot of goals and statistics in those kind of games. which again, that has its value. I'm not saying it doesn't, but so I can't envision a scenario, even in an optimistic, where he's leading the line in a 4-3-3 in Europe. I mean, I can't come to that. So I don't understand why. Because then we're back to he's blocking a younger player potentially. We're not bringing someone in. We have no idea. But is Afolabi, if he's going to be the third striker on the team, if you're bringing in Nisbet, and let's assume Jetty's staying and suitable for the system, which actually I think he's probably okay for Postecoglou's system. Why are we clogging up the system with a 31-year-old with his profile and track record? I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me. I listen, and I might be proven wrong, and if I am proven wrong, then I'll be happy, because I mean, Leigh Griffiths will be back scoring and Celtic will be back winning. So best case scenario, Leigh Griffiths gets in the shape of his life, gets back to his form, which is 5 years ago, and scores loads of goals. But I'm not holding my breath and waiting for that to happen.
Yeah, I'm sorry, and so the last thing I'll say on this is the other thing that just doesn't make sense is that if you everything I've read and heard about Postecoglou when he comes in, the transition period, it's a bloodletting of the Leigh Griffiths of the world. I mean, that's who he gets rid of. Are the players that have a name at the club that were maybe not performing on big wages, that are getting older. I mean, that's the player profile that gets vanquished in an Ange transition. So again, pile that on top of everything else. Even if he was a 31-year-old striker who was professional, who fit Ange's system, he's still, in the Ange track record, that would still be a player that you'd be like, well, I'm not sure he's going to keep him. And you throw on all the other stuff that's specific to Griffiths, and it just doesn't add up to me. So
one of the things that came with the Urhoghide transfer and the Liam Shaw transfer is a preseason friendly against Sheffield Wednesday. So that's coming up next week. The Huddle Breakdown will be back for that, reacting to the game and looking at how Celtic actually played in their first game under Ange Postecoglou. But I guess before I let you go then, James, since he's taken over the direction of the club, the general feel around the place, what's your feelings going into the new season now that we're about 3 weeks away from Midtjylland in the Champions League?
I'm incredibly optimistic as far as an entertainment product. So as far as the routine of watching 2 games a week, I think there's going to be a lot of excitement and reason for optimism on that front. I mean, that it's not going to be, I don't think anyway, even in let's say Rodgers' second half of his second season and pretty much most of the rest of his tenure, it was not the most exciting entertainment product on the actual pitch. So I'm very optimistic on that front, meaning that ultimately want to be entertained, and I think that's going to happen. Outside of that, I have kind of a bifurcated expectation, meaning that I'm quite concerned about the transition because of the mess that Mackay and Ange have inherited relative to where the squad is, the infrastructure at the club, the lack of really any senior personnel that are remaining. I mean, that came out this week. The head of sports science is gone. There's no director of football. There's no head of recruitment. There's no head scout. I mean, as Mackay said at the fan event last week, he's benchmarking against clubs in Europe, and and that's good news. That's part of why I'm optimistic longer term. It sounds like they're moving in a direction to try and figure out what they need to do to actually modernize. But I think that the lack of any of that going on up until now just speaks to the mess that they inherited and how the prior regime and the debacle that was last season kind of poisoned the well. So I'm probably less optimistic for this upcoming season than I was, let's say, a month ago, when we didn't know, when I didn't have a strong sense. I could, at least from a Jackson Pollock painting perspective, imagine that Mackay had been working in the background and over the first 2 months, and that, they were going to hit the ground running. We'd have a director of football by now. We'd have a lot of that infrastructure in place. The vision would already be set. And I think what we found out with what's been saying, or at least it sounds like this, is that, he was a rugby guy and a rugby executive and didn't pay all that much attention to the football industry. That's kind of what it sounds like. So he's got a lot to learn, and there's a lot to be done. And I think because of that, I'm probably, now I will say, this is the last thing I'll say on that, is it's still a 2-horse race. So just normal, variance, as we always say, or I always say, it's a 2-horse race in a league season. Who knows what can happen? So it's not that I have no hope, or that I don't even think that there's a significant possibility that Celtic can win the league. Of course there is. Is that a 30% chance? Is it 25%? Is it 40%? I think it's somewhere in that range. I haven't really, we'll have to see what happens with the transfer window, and, have a better sense by maybe August 1st, and then certainly by September 1st. But I think that's where we're looking at. I don't see there's a scenario here where it's likely that Celtic should be a favorite heading into the season. So we're going to need some positive variance, most likely. And, if we lay the groundwork and the plumbing for a good long-term plan for the club, we get an entertaining product on the, while we're, competing this season, and it's a good competition. I mean, I do expect the league to be relatively close, and the team to be competitive and entertaining. Then to me, that's a win for the season. But my delusions of grandeur for this season, I think, have been vanquished.
Yeah. The rebuild at the minute feels more like a game of Jenga, and I really hope that the game of Jenga does not end the way it's supposed to, with everything coming crumbling down in front of our eyes. Hopefully it starts to progress. I do want to give a shout out before we finish up. I want to give a shout out to the person on Twitter who said that Celtic should go without a sports science department this year because it's an absolute nonsense anyway. What a wonderful football take that is, because I actually genuinely would love to see that. I would love to see how a professional football team would survive, or attempt to survive, in a professional football environment now without a sports science department, because that would be amazing entertainment.
Yeah, what you learn, I think, if you follow any kind of surveys or polling data, is that about 20% of the population on any certain issue is completely out of their minds. Mm-hmm. So, there are still people that believe that the earth is flat. And I'm sure if you asked enough people in a survey, you'd find some that think it's okay for players to be smoking at halftime. Yeah,
well, that's the problem with things. Ask people what they want, and they say more horses. That's the crux of it. It's democracy doesn't work. That's why. It's because these people let us down. But anyway, morally, I'm not sure that experiment would actually be a right thing to do for players, because you'd see probably about 15 injuries by Christmas time, at least. So anyway, that is the transfer so far and the transfer situation at Celtic. James, thanks very much. We're going to be back with the Huddle Breakdown next week after the first preseason friendly, and that will mean more content on this channel as well. So if you want to get that content, subscribe to the channel below. You'll get notified every time it goes live as well. And do like this video if you do like it, because it helps more people see it, helps the channel grow. And I really want to get to 2,000 subscribers before the season starts, or before we get to the first real competitive match against Michelin. But we will be back again next week. Thanks for watching, and we'll chat to you later.